as the Norwegian government confirms, and it's falling fast, about 6% a year. So that means the world is pretty much close to peak of ordinary conventional oil. Then there's another surge of this deep water oil, the last frontier, so to speak. There's a little surge of that coming in probably. And then, of course, there's the heavy oils of Canada and Venezuela that come in. There's a huge resource. There's no shortage of it. But the extraction rate is extremely slow and expensive. So if you put the whole thing together, I think we have a peak around 210.
I think the general consensus, probably within the oil industry itself, although they're very unwilling to say this publicly, but the academic researchers, who are much more likely to be independent and hard-headed in their analysis outside the oil industry, believe that peak oil probably in the area of a 2010, 2015, something like that. And after that, we begin to see a gradual, very slow, gradual reduction in the supply, but an acceleration of demand. That's why this is not alarmist. It is impossible to believe that that will not happen. It is going to happen.
Also, there's so much debate about this date of peak. It really misses the point to a degree, because whether the peak came last year, this year, or in 10 years' time doesn't really make that much difference, because it's not a high peak. It's only the maximum, a rather gentle curve. And the real impact of all of that, which is beginning to be realized, is not the peak itself, but the vision of the long decline that follows peak. And that's a relentless, remorseless decline that goes on forever at 2 or 3% a year. It's not individually very much, but that eats into our supply very seriously and ever worse.
We expend about 10 calories of fossil fuel energy for every calorie of food energy that we produce. Now, this would have been impossible in any earlier historical time before we had access to cheap oil. If we had been expending more energy to grow food in the medieval era than the food gave us, we would starve. It's only because of this one-time only gift from nature of fossil fuels that were created over millions of years and stored up, and that we have been drawing down over the course of just a couple of hundred years, that we're able to run these energy deficits in our food system. So we're enormously exposed in that area, and peak oil could in fact mean widespread hunger and even famine on a global scale if we don't prepare for it and begin to transform our global food system to one that is not so dependent on fossil fuels.
So I think it's a great illusion for people to think, oh yes, we've been through this, we faced it in the 1970s and we got out of it. We sort of got out of it. You could argue that we made a right mess of getting out of it and got ourselves into a much worse fix, and we should have listened to some of the signals from the earth and so forth, but we clearly didn't. This time it's going to be different. And I think that's going to be rather a stark realization for people. And I think people for a long time are going to be thinking, oh, we got out of the 1930s, we got out of the 1970s, what's going wrong? Why can't we get out of it now using the same kind of techniques? And I think using the same kind of techniques, at least some of the similar techniques, will be a great mistake, although I've no doubt that's what's going to be tried, unfortunately. There's a very strong relationship between economic growth and energy growth, particularly between growth of electricity demand and also of oil demand. And one of the reasons is that as the economy grows, we nearly always transport more stuff, people drive to more places, they fly to more places, more tourism, more everything, more food comes from far distant places.